So there are so many misconceptions about using your VA loan. So today I have my favorite lender with us, and we are going to go through all the different misconceptions, and it starts right now. Welcome back to Real Estate in the 757. We're going to be talking about VA loans today. I have my favorite go-to lender, Lisa Wynkoop with Atlantic Bay. She's one of our local lenders here in our area.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could make it. So let's start with who is eligible to use the VA loan?
So a veteran who has served either in active duty military or in the reserves, and in some cases a widow who has eligibility if her her veteran husband had passed from either a service related injury or in the line of duty.
Okay. All right, so that's good to know. So you don't have to be active currently.
Nope.
You
can be
your
retired.
benefits,
You can be
you
just
keep
have
those
your
forever,
service
right?
period end.
Okay.
As long as you were honorably discharged.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the misconceptions.
Okay.
All right, so the first one is that you can only use your VA once.
That is wrong.
Okay, false.
You can use it a subsequent time. You can sell a home and purchase another home. There are even options to purchase a home while you still own a VA home, a home secured by a VA loan.
Okay, so wait, so I can have used my loan, my VA loan on the home that I'm in now, but let's say I have orders to a different state and I'm thinking about keeping this home and making it rental.
Right.
But I can move and potentially buy another home.
Right. So what
using
you're
my
doing
VA?
in that scenario is you're using your remaining eligibility as a veteran. So when the VA guarantees a VA loan to a lender, they charge a VA funding fee and they secure an amount of eligibility. So there's always remaining eligibility. So depending on
Kind of like under a big umbrella.
you have a certain amount of eligibility. So depending on where you're transferring to, what the county limit is, what you have remaining, your first step is to go to a very experienced licensed loan officer, have them determine. You pull your certificate of eligibility from the VA website. It takes a matter of hours. Once you have that, you determine what you have remaining to purchase with no down payment and maybe with a down payment. So there are different options out there.
Okay, and let's say, here's another scenario that I'm moving, but maybe I think I'm going to rent for a little bit. Maybe I don't want to buy sight unseen, which we do a lot of here. A lot of clients that do that, but there are plenty who are like, that's too much for me.
Right.
So
or they want to get to know the area first.
Get to know the area better first.
That is totally allowable. You can always use your remaining eligibility. There's no time limit on it. But there is something to think about. If you need the rental income from your previous home that you just vacated to qualify. So VA loans require that you have a 2-year rental history documented by tax returns in order to use the rental income to help you qualify for a new home. If you are immediately vacating that home, that's not a requirement.
It's not the same scenario.
It's not the same scenario. If you're moving from one duty station to another, you decide to rent for a year, you cannot use that rental income unless you have a 2-year history documented by tax returns. But sometimes you can qualify with both payments.
Okay.
So that's another thing where you really just need to have an advisor, a loan officer help you.
Right. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Second misconception. I hear this a lot, that VA loans are difficult to get.
No, actually their qualifying ratios are some of the highest.
Right.
They allow more flexibility with debt ratio. The credit scores can go as low as a 580 in some situations.
Okay.
If there are some things to offset that credit score, like maybe cash in the bank, or maybe there was a reason for that 580 score. So yeah, VA loans, they're my favorite.
Yeah, I do them all the time, and I get asked by, other realtors that are in different areas that don't do VA loans very much. They're the ones that are like, how does that even work? And I heard that those are horrible to deal with.
I think when the market was crazy, people didn't want to sell to VA buyers because the VA appraiser, they were worried that VA appraisals were more strict. They're really not. Yeah, I think it's a disservice to veterans to tell them not to use their VA because it's such a great benefit.
And they've earned that right.
Exactly.
They've earned that right. I do have some of the veterans that are buying here think that you have a separate VA inspection. And it's not an inspection that's different. It comes down to the appraisal.
The only difference is VA actually has an appraisal system where we request the appraisal from VA and they assign the appraiser. So with a
Okay.
conventional or an FHA loan, Atlantic Bay has their list of appraisers or whatever lender you work with. So they kind of use more local lenders they have relationships with. So it's a round robin with the VA appraiser.
Okay. All right. And then I think there are some conditions of the home that a VA appraiser
Right.
is going to potentially look at a little
Right.
differently than a
To protect the
conventional.
veteran, they will always call out a safety issue.
Right.
If there's something that to the naked eye shows it's a safety issue, they will
They have
call
to
it
call
out.
it out.
And also any outbuildings need to be inspected by the termite report.
moisture,
It has to
okay.
be covered.
All right. So any detached
Sheds,
shed.
garages.
Okay. So just
Yeah,
another
that's
little,
a little difference.
different. All right. Okay. Let's move on to the third one.
Okay.
All right. VA loans are only for single family homes.
Nope. You can actually purchase a duplex up to 4 units with your VA loan.
That's crazy.
So you can buy an income producing property.
as long as you are living in one of them.
as long
right?
as you're occupying one of them.
Okay. So condos.
Yep. Now, if you purchase a VA condo, it has to be approved by VA. The project does.
Okay.
So
Like the
and
association.
the association,
itself.
the actual condo project.
Okay.
We have here in Virginia Beach, we have 2-unit condominiums that are prevalent, especially in Shore Drive, some of the beach areas.
Okay.
And those are not VA approved. But literally, I can usually get them VA approved within 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
As long as I can get the paperwork from the owners.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, it has to be on the VA approved list.
Okay.
Reasons the VA might not approve a project is rental cap. They don't like a lot of rentals, and they won't approve projects that have a lot of rentals. So
Right.
that's something to
Does that
check.
come from the VA side of it, or is that from the association?
The
side of
VA
it?
side of it sets the guidelines.
Okay.
The association tells us what their guidelines and their
Okay.
covenants and their declarations are.
Right.
So
'Cause they
that's
can
all
make
reviewed
that
by VA to
determination on-
determine if it's an
Okay.
approved property that they
Right.
will allow. Mm-hmm. So,
Okay.
but it's good to always check before you show properties to your
It
VA
is,
buyers.
and sometimes I forget that.
You
I'll
text
just
me,
be honest.
hey, check this condo, is
Yeah.
it VA approved? Because you don't want them to get their hopes
You
up.
don't want to show the condo and then go back and check if
Right.
it is not approved
Right.
for the VA loans, and then you can't really make an offer.
Right.
So it's always best to check that first. Right. Okay. All right. And then the last misconception that I want to talk about today is that there's no cost to the VA loan.
Right, because it is a benefit to buy with your VA using no money down. But you
But-
would, as a veteran, you still would need to pay your closing costs, which
Mm-hmm.
can be anywhere from 2.5%, 3%, up to 4%, depending on your loan amount, sales price.
Right. And sometimes buyers think that you can roll in your closing
Right.
costs.
I hear that a
You
lot.
cannot
Can I
do
finance
that.
my closing costs?
Right.
No, you cannot. You
No.
can ask the seller to pay your closing
Right,
costs.
we can do that. We can ask for closing cost assistance from the seller and have them pay your closing costs, but it's not rolled into
Right.
the loan.
The only way you would consider it rolled into the loan is say a house is listed at $250 and you offer $260 and ask them to pay $10,000 in your cost.
That's true.
So that's kind of rolling it in, but that would also depend on will the property appraise, and that's where you would have to run the
Right.
numbers and
Yeah,
make sure
feel
that's
confident
worth
that it
the
would.
risk.
Okay, and then I also want to ask about the funding fee,
Right.
because this is something specific to the VA loans.
Yes. So with a conventional loan, when you put less than 20% down, you have PMI. With a government loan, with VA and FHA, they have guarantees. And VA's guarantee is the funding fee. So basically, they're guaranteeing that loan. If you use your VA the first time, it's a fee of 2.15% that is added to the loan amount and financed in the loan amount. So that is over a 30-year period. So it's not a huge difference.
So the
in your
funding
monthly
fee
payment.
is financed
It
into
is
the
financed
loan.
into the loan,
Okay.
but not the closing costs.
Right.
If you use your subsequent VA a second time and don't put any money down, it's a 3.3% funding fee. But in either scenario, if you can put 5% down, that drops to 1.5% funding fee.
Okay.
Or 10% down drops to 1.25. So that's really minimal.
Absolutely.
And VA rates are typically, I would say 3/4, sometimes even a point better than conventional.
Right.
So it's really a benefit.
To use it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan
We
of
love
VA
working
loans.
with VA buyers
We really
in
do.
the Hampton Roads
Yes,
area.
we really do.
Definitely.
Right. Any other tips for VA buyers?
I think just, it's always important just to monitor your credit, especially when you're deployed or things happen. It's always a good idea to just kind of keep an eye on that and make sure,
Right.
with you being deployed or moving around, just to make sure that credit score is very important.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming and
you.
talking to us about VA
My
loans.
pleasure.
All
Yes.
right. So if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. If you've got any other questions about VA loans, feel free to drop those in the comments below. Thanks again for watching.